In December 1985, General Motors signed a contract so unusual that the airline executives involved didn't have a category for it. It wasn't a passenger deal. It wasn't a standard freight contract either. It was an agreement to build a single American luxury car by shipping it, unfinished, across the Atlantic Ocean, twice, on modified Boeing 747 jumbo jets. Not once, twice, every single car. For 7 straight years. This wasn't some experimental one-off. This became the actual production process for a real car you could walk into a Cadillac dealership and buy. The car was called the Alante, and the plan to build it may be the strangest, most expensive supply chain in automotive history. By the mid-1980s, Cadillac had a problem, and it wasn't really about engineering. It was about credibility. American luxury cars were getting outclassed on style and image by European names, Mercedes, Jaguar, BMW, and Cadillac desperately wanted a halo car, something that could sit in the same conversation as a Ferrari or an Alfa Romeo and make people take the brand seriously again. So GM did something almost nobody expected from a company famous for building everything in-house. It went to Italy. Specifically, it went to Pininfarina, the legendary coach builder in Turin responsible for shaping some of the most iconic Ferraris ever built. If you wanted European design credibility overnight, there was no better name to put on the spec sheet. GM signed Pininfarina to design and hand-build the body for a new 2-seat convertible, the Cadillac Alante. And here's where the story stops being a normal car deal and turns into something almost nobody in Detroit had attempted before. GM didn't just want Pininfarina's design, it wanted Pininfarina's factory to physically build the car's body. The sheet metal, the paint, the interior trim, even the convertible top. While the mechanical guts of the car, the engine, transmission, and suspension stayed entirely American-made, mated to the body back home in Detroit. On paper, that sounds like a reasonable division of labor. In practice, it created a logistics nightmare that had never existed at this scale in the auto industry. Here's why. GM had recently shut down Fisher Body Plant Number 18, the facility that had supplied Cadillac bodies since 1921. Without that in-house body plant, and without wanting to ship half-built cars by boat, GM needed another way to move thousands of car bodies back and forth across an ocean, reliably, every single week, for years. So, on December 4, 1985, GM sat down with 2 of the biggest airlines in the world, Alitalia and Lufthansa, and signed a $100 million air cargo contract. Cadillac's own general manager called it, without exaggeration, the largest assembly line in the world. Think about what that actually meant in physical terms. At GM's Detroit Hamtramck plant, workers would begin the process by fitting sub-assemblies into the car, the air conditioning system, the dashboard, the electrical wiring. Then those partially built cars would be loaded onto specially configured Boeing 747 freighters and flown across the Atlantic to Turin, Italy. From the airport, trucks carried the bodies about 20 miles to Pininfarina's facility in San Giorgio Canavese, where craftsmen would paint them, trim the interiors, and fit the convertible tops by hand. Then, and this is the part that still stuns people who hear it for the first time, the finished bodies were loaded right back onto another 747 and flown back to Detroit, where GM would finally install the engine, the transmission, and the suspension to complete the car. 1 car. 2 transatlantic flights. Every single unit, for 7 years. To make that possible, GM, Alitalia, and Boeing had to engineer something that didn't exist yet. Specialized aluminum cradles designed to hold unfinished car bodies securely inside a cargo aircraft during flight, loaded through the distinctive hinged nose sections that some 747 freighters use for oversized cargo. Each flight could carry up to 56 car bodies at once, arrange 2 to a pallet, and at the height of the operation, up to 3 flights a week made the roughly 600-mile round-trip journey. GM even built in contingency planning for Turin's notoriously foggy winters because a single missed flight could ripple through the entire production schedule. Now, here's the number that puts the whole operation in perspective. GM actually considered shipping the bodies by sea instead of air. The math made the air option look almost reasonable by comparison. Shipping by container ship would have meant fitting only 4 cars per 40-foot container, waiting 24 days for each shipment to cross the ocean and using more than 5,000 containers total, requiring a vessel with roughly twice the cargo capacity of the largest container ships that existed at the time. Flying the bodies took about 8 hours. It sounds absurd that flying was the practical choice here. And yet, by comparison to that sea freight nightmare, it actually was. The Alante launched in 1987 as a genuine attempt to compete in the ultra-luxury segment, priced around $54,700, a serious sum for the era, and marketed as America's first real entry into the same tier as the world's top European sports and luxury convertibles. For a moment, it looked like the gamble might pay off. The car had genuine Italian design pedigree. It had a distinctive sculpted body unlike anything else on a Cadillac dealer lot, and the airbridge itself became a marketing story on its own. Proof that Cadillac was serious enough about quality to build the car across 2 continents. But the cracks started showing almost immediately. And this is where the story takes its turn. Sales never hit the numbers GM projected. The airbridge program had been built around ambitious production estimates. Thousands of cars a year, filling those 747s to capacity multiple times a week. Instead, demand came in soft, and an assembly line built around fixed transatlantic flight schedules doesn't get cheaper when volume drops. The planes still had to fly. The cradles still had to be loaded. The Pininfarina production line still had massive fixed costs, regardless of how many buyers actually wanted the car. In 1988, just 1 year after the launch, Lufthansa pulled out of the arrangement entirely, citing the underwhelming sales figures. The operation kept going with Alitalia alone, but the economics had already turned against it. By the time production finally ended in 1993, Cadillac had built a total of 21 430 Alantes over that 7-year run, a genuinely small number for a mainstream luxury nameplate, and nowhere near enough to make the astronomical logistics costs of flying every single body across the Atlantic twice actually pencil out. The car had real strengths. It had real Italian design credibility. But it never escaped the shadow of its own supply chain, an operation so expensive and so complicated that even industry insiders openly questioned whether Cadillac would have been better off simply building the whole car in Detroit and accepting a less exotic design pedigree. And what happened to the airplanes themselves might be the strangest coda to this entire story. The Alitalia 747 that served as the literal flagship of the airbridge operation, tail number IDMR, the exact aircraft pictured in Cadillac's own period marketing, kept flying long after the Alante died. Alitalia retired it in 2004, and it was picked up by a Russian cargo carrier, then passed through other operators over the following years. Remarkably, as of the mid-2020s, that same aircraft is reportedly still flying cargo routes today, registered in Moldova, more than 3 decades after it first carried unfinished Cadillac bodies across the ocean. The car it was built to serve has been gone for over 30 years. The plane outlived it. The Cadillac Alante wasn't a bad car. It was, in some ways, a genuinely bold one. An American manufacturer willing to fly half-built cars across an ocean twice just to borrow a little Italian soul. But it's also a case study in how the smartest-sounding idea in a boardroom can turn into the most expensive liability on a balance sheet the moment sales don't match the projections. 2 flights per car, 21,000 cars, 7 years. And in the end, the planes proved more durable than the program they were built to serve. So here's the question worth asking. Was the airbridge a genuinely brilliant piece of 1980s logistics engineering, or proof that some ideas are too complicated to survive contact with the real market? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want to see another car that GM nearly bet the whole brand on, the video on screen right now is exactly where to go next.